hosts. I'm a PhD environmental engineer, and this is my wife, Jacqui, and together we wrote the book, Nature's Mold RX, a non-toxic solution to toxic mold. And we're here to tell you a little bit about the story about how this came about. Jacqui, you want to start off?
Well, I had been in Young Living since August of 1999, and Ed and I owned an engineering company, a small environmental engineering company. One day we were sitting at breakfast, and he was telling me about a client he had who had a mold problem in their building. It was what kind of building?
Yeah, this was actually an apartment complex with 48 units, and it had been closed down for several months. It was in humid southeastern Missouri, and the mold had built up in there just unbelievable proportions. They had gone through and cleaned it. Well, they'd gone through and taken out, I had a construction company come in and take out the water damaged and mold damaged materials, and then they had a cleaning company come through and clean. And then I was hired as a third-party environmental engineer to check for the things that they had to clean up, like lead paint and radon and mold. And mold was one of the problems they had. And even after all of that removing and cleaning, they still had unacceptable high levels of mold in more than half of the apartments. So they had spent a lot of money already, and the cleaning company had used hospital disinfectant and bleach, and they couldn't understand why the mold kept coming back. So they asked me to meet with the cleaning company, and I asked them to bring their MSDS sheets so I could see what actual chemicals they had used. And I found that they had used a disinfectant that was a bactericide, not a fungicide. So I told them to go back and get an industrial strength fungicide and go through and clean again. They did that. I came back a couple of weeks later, still had mold way beyond the acceptable limits that we had to meet. So when I was talking with Jacqui, I told her about this, and she said, well, why don't you try essential oils? Because it says right here on this bottle that they're antifungal, so maybe they would kill the mold. And I said, well, give me some evidence of this, some studies that show, and she did. She gave me a lot of studies, university studies, that showed that actually several different essential oils will kill mold. But this was all in laboratory settings. Apparently had never been done in the field in an actual mold-infested building. So I said, well, I'm kind of hesitant to go to an engineering client and suggest that they can solve their problem using aromatherapy.
Actually, he said, I am not going to an engineering client and suggesting they use aromatherapy. They'll laugh me out of the state.
Yeah, and I said, besides that, how am I supposed to, I've got this little bottle, 15 milliliters, how do I disperse that in a 48-unit apartment complex? How do I do that? And she said,
you're the engineer, you figure it out.
So that's what I did. I did some work, and I found out for a given space, and these apartments were all under 1,000 square feet. They were 850, 900 square feet. And so I figured out how much oil would take at the rate of the throughput with the diffusers that we had in order to saturate the air in that room in a 24-hour period. And that's what I did. I set it up, ran it for 24 hours, but I took samples both before and after. But the samples after were way, way lower. And so the client was really impressed, but he said, well, we've tried all this other stuff with bleach and fungicides and everything, and it just keeps coming back. How do we know it won't with this? And I said, we don't. This is an experiment, so we're going to see.
And we told them that in advance.
Yeah, we had told them in advance, but they said, we've spent all this money, and we can't rent these apartments if we don't meet the standards for mold. So we're willing to try. And I said, okay, don't do anything more, and I'll come back in 2 weeks and take samples again. When I came back in 2 weeks, the levels were even lower than they were right after diffusing, in spite of the fact that they had carpenters and electricians and plumbers working in these apartments during that time. So this was a really exciting plus in that there was a residual effect, that it actually kept working for at least 2 weeks after, and I found out since then that it works even longer than that.
So we did testing at different sites for several years, and then in 2007 we published the book Nature's Mold RX, and it has stories about people who had had mold exposure and the types of things they experienced, and it also has stories about the results. It has many of the results that were actual data collected before and after diffusing. So that's a lot of what's in the book. There's a lot more there, but that's a lot of what's there. A good protocol to help anybody be able to use essential oils to get rid of mold in buildings.
Yeah, and since then we've done quite a number of additional studies, actual cases where we've used this or helped other people use it. Literally thousands of them, and the book is a really good seller. We're really happy with the way it's.
Well, the thing that we really love is that people have been helped by it. We get emails and phone calls every day from people around the world telling us how much they appreciate this information and how much it's helped them. And that's what's most important to us, that it is actually helping people.
One other thing that we might mention real quick is that since these are scientific studies and we're dealing with killing mold and eliminating mold, and not with specific health issues, even though it does help, it is compliant with FDA standards. So as a Young Living distributor, you don't have to worry about that when you're talking about using thieves oil or essential oils for getting rid of mold.
In buildings.
In buildings, yes. All right, what makes this book different and unique from all others is it contains a protocol. If you have a mold problem in your home or in your workplace, in your school, in your office, it's being used in hospitals now as well. This is a non-toxic method of taking care of mold, including toxic mold, and it exceeds everything else out there in 2 ways. One, it is non-toxic, and the other is that it has a residual effect. The other things, which are mostly toxic chemicals, have to be used and dispersed because they're harmful to human health.
The other thing that we would want you to know is that all other options for getting rid of mold in buildings either take care of mold spores in the air or on surfaces. Using essential oils and the protocol in our book, you get rid of both at the same time.
And the way this book is unique is that it has the story behind each of the case studies, what the problem was, and then it has the actual data, field-tested data before and after, and this data is evaluated independently by environmental laboratories that have no connection with us or with Young Living. If you have a mold problem, and you may have even if you don't know it, because oftentimes it causes problems that are not diagnosed until you find out that you have mold in your home or your office. So if you have this problem or even suspect you have, using this method and the protocol in this book will give you a way of taking care of it much less expensive than most of the methods out there for remediating mold.